Here.
Mayor Sternquist.
Here. Thank you. I'd like to move to item 3, the invocation, and I feel honored to be able to give that this evening. If you would like to stand and join in listening. Dear Lord, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons, no matter how weak or poor, with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of the human person. Amen.
Amen.
And Steve, why don't you lead us in the flag salute today?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. Ceremonial matters. It says presentation. What is? That one?
None tonight, Mayor.
Okay. Item 6, public comments on items not listed on the agenda. Do we have anyone who'd like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, we move to item 7, the consent calendar. All consent calendar items may be approved in a single motion as recommended unless removed for further discussion. Is there anyone who would like to?
Mayor, Mayor Sternquist, I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Any objections? May we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Chavez.
Yes.
Councilmember Vizcarra.
Yes.
Councilmember Yu.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mann.
Yes.
Mayor Sternquist.
Yes. Okay, that's been approved unanimously. We move to item 8, public hearing, establishment of an expedited, non-discretionary, multifamily review process and a library of prototype architectural designs for multifamily projects. And we have our community development director here with us.
He'll be with us in just shortly, Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Before you tonight is the continued public hearing to consider the multifamily prototypes and a process that we received funding for from the state through the SB1 grant several years ago. The byproduct of which is what's before you today. Part of the team, Andrew Cohen, one of our management analysts, our community development director, and the team from RMR will be here on Zoom to go through the presentation tonight. So with that, I think, Andrew, are you ready?
Good evening, Mayor Sternquist and Mayor Pro Tem Mann and council members. Today we have a pretty exciting project to present to you tonight. I want to just start off by giving you some background on the purpose of the project. We are trying to create a new process to expedite review and approval for multifamily projects in the city. That's for projects that would be in the R2 and R3 zones. This project is going to include prototype plans and design palettes that will allow applicants to choose any of these palettes and then get an expedited approval. Part of this project is going to involve providing clear and consistent direction to developers, help meet state mandated housing goals as outlined in the housing element, and also to comply with SB 478, which is the Housing Opportunity Act. Some background, all of this project is being funded by a grant that was approved by the state of California back in March of 2019. They announced the PGP Planning Grants Program. And in November of 2019, you authorized us to apply for that. And in March of 2020, the city was awarded a $160,000 grant. So just to give you an overview of what this review process will look like, it will involve an optional, expedited, non-discretionary approval process. In order to do that, an applicant would need to choose one of the architectural prototypes that we're going to show you tonight. If they follow this process, it will be through a zoning clearance, which doesn't involve any kind of discretionary review or public hearing. If the project does involve a subdivision, then it would have to go to the Planning Commission for review and approval.
May I ask a question, Mayor?
Yes, of course.
So, when you say no public hearing, how would a neighbor find out if something's being considered?
The only time we send out notices is either for projects that involve public hearings or projects like site plan reviews that involve two-story additions on a house. So this type of project would be none of those. It would not involve a public hearing, and it would not involve a two-story addition on a house. So there would not be any public noticing for an approval of a project of this type.
Maybe I'm,
I think so. I think your answer is no, they don't get notice.
yeah.
No notice,
And,
yeah.
and you know, that's, yeah, and it looks like Director Rima
that-
wants to address.
No, that's correct. It would not include a public notice. The part of the expedited part of this process is taking the public hearing portion out of it. In order to do that, there's no public notice that occurs.
I understand that,
Yeah.
and, but we oftentimes, we hear complaints of community, well, why, we didn't know this is being built, especially when I look at the presentation material that you guys presented. There are not, especially the multifamily, they're pretty large projects. Would those get public noticed, the larger ones?
At this point, the process that's before you tonight, there's no public notice that's provided unless it's along with a subdivision map. So if it's being subdivided as a condo, then it would have a public notice.
But if it's
If it's an apartment building,
multifamily rental, neighbors wouldn't know anything about it?
that's correct.
Whoa.
Just to kind of follow up on that, so I can see it now that people are going to say, well, wait a minute, how come we weren't told about this? I guess this is their notice right now, is that we're thinking or contemplating filing or creating such a law or ordinance that allows for no notice, essentially.
That's correct.
Now,
yes.
is this no public hearing? Is that part of the whole process of getting it state approved and all this? I mean, it wouldn't be something that we could excise out of this and say, no, we want at least some notice.
Right. We could include a public hearing, we could include a notice that the item is being reviewed or an item has been submitted, that could be included.
But they don't want a public hearing because that's going to delay the process. And
Yes.
that seems to be the focus of this, is to speed up the process.
Yes, so we do have a process in the code where people are notified that the director will be making a decision on an application in advance of that decision. That gives them an opportunity to provide us comment. The difficulty with this scenario is we would be giving people notice that the city has received an application, but basically we would not be able to take into account their concerns
Yeah,
because
there's no
this
recourse
is
for 'em, really.
because this is completely objective. It's a very black and white decision. Does it meet the code requirements or not?
I think that's a big step, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, when I was looking at it, I thought, well, could we at least, I mean, it's like to Director Rima's point, maybe you give them the notice that something's being reviewed by our planning department, but yet there's really no process for them to come knock on your door and find out more. Oh, can I see the plans, and can you make them change this? There's none of that opportunity.
Or even come to the council hearing and say, hey,
Right.
my neighbor's doing this, is something I can do to stop it? Nothing can happen.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
Moving on. The next part of my presentation was to give you an overview of the prototypes, and I promise not to bore you too much. I'll try to move through this pretty quickly since there's a number of renderings to show you tonight.
Andrew?
Yes.
Could you just go over, what the goals were
Sure. So-
of this
Yeah.
state? Just so that the public has a greater understanding of like Vincent's concern, and they might not know what the goals were.
Sure. So moving back one slide, the overall goal of this project is to provide an optional, and I want to emphasize optional because we're not taking away the traditional site plan review process that's available to applicants. This is just to give them another option that if they want to go through an expedited approval with a shorter time span, smaller fees, less cost to them, cost in time and money, then they can go through this expedited approval process that's non-discretionary.
So the only difference there is what we're doing now. I think that's what I'm trying to get to, is so people understand the difference if there really is a difference in certain areas.
Sure, yeah. So normally for a multifamily project, it's discretionary. It's a site plan review. So that means that they're going to submit the plans to the city, and it could take several months where they're going to be going back and forth with the city on issues like the design and the overall, scope of the project. So there's that back and forth, and that's very costly to applicants. And then also the discretion where the city can make suggestions to them on improving the design. And for some applicants, that can be frustrating because it takes time and they have to pay their architect to make further revisions. So we're providing them with another avenue that they can follow where they can avoid having to go through that altogether.
So, if I understand what you're saying is, why would someone choose the long, drawn-out, expensive way versus this so-called expedited way? I
Sure.
can't see anybody not doing the expedited review.
I
Is there a
think-
reason why they wouldn't?
I think the primary reason someone would choose to go through the traditional route is because they want to have the freedom to make their own design. Maybe they want to
Oh,
come
okay,
up
I
with
see. Right.
an
So rather than
architecture.
the ones that we have on the board,
Right,
they say, well, I don't really like any of those.
sure,
And then they have to go through the regular one.
exactly.
Okay, good answer.
Yeah. So that's the overall goal, to create this separate optional process that's non-discretionary. And what we're proposing to you tonight is two things. One is a code amendment to create this process. And then the other main thing is as a resolution that would establish this prototype library that over time we would add additional designs to. Right now, tonight, we're presenting you with two different designs, which I'm going to show you in a second. But the resolution would establish this library, and then over time, we can keep adding more designs to it to give applicants more options, basically.
Would those designs come before council to approve to go into the library?
Not the individual ones.
Not the individual
Yeah, it would just create this library, and then over time, we would add additional designs. I should mention, the designs that we're presenting to you tonight are not something that staff just willy-nilly came up with out of their head. These are based upon the zoning code standards. So I can say that all of these designs that we're going to present you are consistent with the standards that are in the zoning code, which the city council has already reviewed and approved several years ago when the zoning code was updated.
I have a quick follow-up. I'm sorry.
Vincent
No, go
first,
ahead.
and then you, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I have no problem with the prototype design. I look at them; they're actually quite handsome, except a few places they're kind of blocky. But we're not really. I'm not really focusing on here. I'm still focused on the fact that no notice. Is there a other than just? I mean, you mentioned the number of reasons why you brought this in front of the council, but is there a mandatory requirement that we must have this process of no public notice?
No, we could add an item to this so that it does require a notice that a decision is going to be made or an application has been submitted.
Okay.
I just want you as a council to know that if we put out a notice to the public that an application has been received, but we tell people that the city has no discretion to take into account their concerns, that's going to create a level of frustration.
I think I'd be more frustrated with that process than not getting a notice. Because
I
if
don't
I,
know.
if I received a notice and I can't comment on it or it be taken into consideration,
Yeah, but I think, it sounds to me like the state doesn't really recognize the concept of due process and the right of people to say something about what's happening next door to them. That's the heartburn I have. And then, so I don't forget, Andrew, just real quick, I wanted to make sure I understood what you said. I know tonight we're going over two different plans, the Spanish colonial and the mid-century. But you said that that there's a potential for adding additional designs later on, but without council review.
That's correct.
Well, how can that be?
Well, by resolution, we're going to create this library, and then
Okay,
create-
but who's gonna make that decision? Well, let's put this type of into the library. That means we have no control over that. That'll be a decision made by staff?
Yeah, so the way the resolution is written now is that staff would be reviewing the additional prototypes and adding them to the library over time. If you want the planning commission to review those before they get added to the library, or if you want to review them before they get added to the library, that's a process that you can modify.
Yeah, because I think there should be some review process. I mean, after all, we're the ones who are creating this, and we're actually approving these. But then, after tonight, our approval disappears.
but Scott, and I'm just thinking out loud, Tom, but in this process, council has already approved the things that are allowed in certain zones, correct?
Yes.
So built into this is already council approval,
Right, so.
because you're not allowing anything.
But not of a specific design, just in general, what
Well,
the parameters would be.
But if I come before the planning commission or, the review process, and I want to build a house, and I say, what can I build? You're going to give me some standards, right? So those standards are the guideline for what I'm going to build.
Yep.
And if I was in any way out of line with the standards, at that point, you would tell me, correct?
Yes. How we see the new prototypes coming about is basically the forms have been set by the development standards themselves, the underlying zoning code. Any additional designs will basically be taking the materials and switching them out so that the massing doesn't change. Really, we're just talking about putting a new face on the building so that it has more of a prairie look, or it has more of a craftsman revival look, rather than what you're seeing before you.
What if somebody on staff decides, I think we should start doing more Gothic designs? Could that theoretically happen without our approval?
Theoretically, yes.
Well, I have a little bit of trouble with that.
So that is something that the council can change in the resolution. Yeah.
I don't know where I came up with Gothic, but maybe I was watching some on TV or something.
Yeah, we as staff would not be preparing these designs. We don't have that ability. We would be leaning on either RRM or one of our other architectural firms to develop these additional styles.
If I could add one thing, in the R1 code, we offer a floor area ratio incentive if someone designs a project according to a predetermined architectural style. And there's an actual list of architectural styles. I think maybe there's 6 or 7 styles there that are in the R1 code. Potentially, we could use that as the goal that when we create these new prototypes, we would follow that list. And right now, we're doing Spanish Revival, the mid-century modern. We could take some other options from that list and use those for the prototype.
So if I may add just 2 things to note, just based on the discussion so far, we circled back before, and if the council makes any decision tonight. One is what kind of noticing or what kind of information we want to provide the community, and then second, to come back with any of these new prototypes for the council. And maybe I'd talk to staff about that. How often would we do that? Is it a yearly basis or something like that? Those are the 2 things that we can bring back in terms of if the council tonight wishes to move forward. Those are things we can look at in terms of the the zoning code amendment, if that's the desire of the council.
So, okay, and I'm probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but from what I gather from this whole presentation, we're trying to expedite the process in a way that will appease the state of California. And we're doing that by saying, look, if you follow either of these right now, two types of designs, you got a kind of a free pass through the system. But at some point, we're thinking of adding more designs onto this list of two. There's only two right now.
Yes.
Okay, and so it'll grow presumably, and it'll grow without the review of the council or planning. How that happens, I have no idea, but apparently staff is already prepared to put together additional designs based on perhaps what we already have in the code, or, I don't know, maybe what people want to build in Temple City. I don't know, I've got a whole bunch of things that go through my mind, because are we trying to turn this into another Irvine, or are we trying to keep it, you know, so that we have a lot of different designs? Are we trying to limit the designs? I don't know, it just seems kind of all over the place to me.
Yeah, to follow up on that, correct me if I'm wrong, the grant that we were awarded is for the preparation of the prototypes.
The grant we were awarded was for the preparation of an objective set of design standards.
Objective design standards, which includes the prototypes.
Yes, sir.
But the Senate bill is not tied to that. That only has to do with floor area ratio. So there is no, I just want to be clear, there is no state mandate that cities have a library of prototypes.
That's correct.
And that there is no state mandate that there be a streamlined process that is, that does not have public notice. This is entirely up to us to decide if we want to implement that.
Yes.
So then why are we doing this?
Well,
That's the next question.
yeah, so kind of related to that is what happens to the grant if we don't adopt it?
We would have to reach out to the state and ask them if we need to repay back the grant if the council doesn't move forward with something.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Fernando? Okay, Andrew?
Okay, sure. So moving on, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the prototypes. As I mentioned, these are based on R2 and R3 lots that are commonly found in the city. We based them upon the Spanish colonial revival and the mid-century modern styles. We also included a variety of materials and colors that applicants could choose from. So the first one that I'm going to show you is our R2 concept, and this is for an R2 lot. This is the site plan that we have. The lot is 60 by 267 60 feet wide by 267 feet long, 16,000 square feet. And what they've got here is 4 detached units. And this development model is something that we commonly see throughout the city, where you'll have the driveway off to one side and then the detached units basically placed in a row in the lot. Something new about this design from what you might see is that we have interior courtyards that are placed between the units, and that's something new that was required by the zoning code that was updated in 2019. There's also a view corridor. Something else that was mandated by the zoning code was that there's a view corridor from the street back to the interior courtyard, so that when people are walking along the street or driving, they can see down to the open space that's over here. So that's just a little design feature that was added in the new zoning code.
Mayor, may I ask a
Yes.
question? You know, first of all, I stated this before, I look at this, and I do find some of these designs quite handsome. So I'm not really criticizing the design. However, none of the lots are exactly alike. So when you say something is a prototype, how much deviation is one allowed before it's no longer a prototype? I mean, for example, actually I have more issue with this floor plan, the individual floor plan than the site plan. The site plan I think are quite handsome. The exterior design is quite handsome. I have a little bit more issue with the interior design. But so I want to understand is when somebody come along and said, well, you know, I think I caught that the lot was 60 feet wide. Let's say I have a 65 feet wide lot and 190 some feet instead of 200. So what, how much leeway the developer or the architect would have in deviating from this? Or maybe I said, you know, that floor plan doesn't really have an entry closet. I really want to hang my coats before I leave the house. How much of that I can have? Or I really want to have a half bath, you know, a powder room, you know, how much leeway do we have before something is no longer a prototype?
Yeah. On the floor plans, there's a lot more leeway. The idea behind even including a floor plan in this design was to demonstrate to an architect that the massing that was developed actually resulted in a floor plan that was usable. And that was a major concern that we had, is we didn't want the architect that we were working with to develop elevations and a mass that then when you went to look at the floor plan, it didn't work. So the floor plans are really for illustrative purposes. But before someone even submits to use this project or these prototypes, it goes through a substantial review process. And so Mr. Coyne has developed a list of things that we would look at to ensure that it meets substantial compliance with these items. Now, a 65-foot lot and a 60-foot lot, you're not going to see substantial differences. But one of the reasons why we want to continue to add prototypes into this library is that when we have someone who has an 80-foot wide lot, you're going to get a very different design then. And that's why we want to continue to add to this library over time, so that we can continue to look at different permutations of sizes.
I think this is where my difficulty is. It goes back to my original question about no notification. At some point, you know, let's say we approve this tonight and just move on, and we have these two prototypes. But like I said, the lots are different, and then the development wanted to start. At some point in time, the design's going to vary so much that it's no longer quote-unquote prototypical. Then would you then ask the applicant to say, well, sorry, you need to go back and we redo all your notification, and by the way,
And it's gonna cost you.
and it's going to cost you.
No, the substantial compliance review occurs at the very beginning of the process. So we would tell them at the very end of beginning of the process, can you use the prototype process, or do you have to go through the normal discretionary review process? So if someone brought in us a project for design for a 100-foot wide lot, and we only have a prototype for a 60-foot wide lot, that's going to be too much variation between the two. And we're going to tell them, if you used these prototypes as an idea to inform your project, you're probably going to go through the discretionary review process very quickly. But at the very beginning of the process, we give them that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind. Maybe this is more towards Greg. Are we going to be able to, and I don't know if it's going to be defined in there, what substantial compliance means? How are we going to enforce that? It's almost like, to me, asking for a lawsuit from somebody says, well, I think that's substantially compliant, and you don't. How does that work? Or how will that work?
That's a good question. And I would say that Mr. Reamer's sort of description is about the best that we can do in a situation like this. If we're talking about variances of, you know, as he said, 5 feet wide, 7 feet wide, it would be substantially the same. You would be building substantially the same building with substantially the same
But see,
footprint.
that's my question, and that's
What
what
is
Vince is trying to
substantial?
bring is what is substantial compliance? Where does that begin and end? I think the obvious ones are, if it's 50 feet over, that's obviously not. But if it's 6 or 7 feet, or is 10 substantial compliance? I mean, I understand that we always have those issues, but to me, I guess that's the legal part of me coming in. When I ever see words like substantial compliance, it's up to a lot of interpretation, and I don't know if that has been addressed by other cities, what substantial compliance is, or how have courts ruled upon what a substantial compliance means. And I just don't want us to have to end up constantly in litigation with somebody who's gonna say, well, differs with our definition of what substantial compliance is, especially when we don't have one in the code. So, I don't know.
And that may be another good thing for us to take note of and look at putting either in the code or probably in the design library to talk about, within the design library, what would we consider substantial compliance with this? So I'll take that down
And
as
I'm
we go.
wondering if that's a road we want to go down, or I guess we want some discretion, but it's like, okay, here's the design, you either meet it or you don't. That would be the easiest one to enforce. It's when we start opening it up to a little bit of a gray area and say, well, I know it says 10 feet, but if you go 12, we'll probably go ahead and take it. That's where I think we start running into a little bit of potential problems, but again, just thinking ahead.
One of the challenges that we face when doing this project is that there's so many different lot sizes in the city. And before we started on this project, we did a very, cursory survey of all the different properties in the city, and we tried to find the most commonly recurring dimensions. And these three are some of the most common ones that we saw, but there are many other dimensions. And so if we approve, or if you approve this prototype library, the goal would be to add additional prototypes that would meet not only different styles, but also other lot dimensions and lot sizes, so that we could find additional prototypes that would match the actual situation that a particular applicant has.
Could at some point we have so many different prototypes that it basically swallows up the discretionary? I mean, couldn't that happen eventually? I mean, we're talking about adding, and I don't know how many we're thinking about adding and how soon, but let's say we add one a year or two a year. I mean, there's only so many designs, I would imagine, and at some point, 10 years from now, this will swallow up everything else, because they're all there.
I think our understanding going into this was that we weren't going to be able to address every single lot dimension or lot size that you're going to find in the city. But our hope is that we can address most of the common ones so that more applicants can use this process versus not.
Sorry, Fernando.
Okay.
I saw you starting to speak and it was already coming out of my mouth, so I apologize.
No comment.
All right. You gotta be quick, it's like Jeopardy.
I know.
So I'll just keep.
I'm
Oh.
not clear on the addition of prototypes to the library. There's no review process on that at all, is there?
The way that the resolution is written now is that the community development director would have the power to add additional prototypes to the library. If that's not the desire of the council and the council wants to review those additions, then the council can modify the resolution.
So those are the two options we have, right?
Well, you can have a planning commission review it, or,
What are the pluses and minuses of not, let's say we don't review it or even planning doesn't. What's the plus of having the community development director do it rather than us? I mean, other than just time, I guess.
yeah, it's probably mostly a time issue, and then if the council's not satisfied with a design, it's going to take additional funds to continue to get to the point where the design meets the council's desires.
And that's 5 people rather than maybe 1.
Yes. I mean, I,
Additional funds on the part of who?
well, on the part of the city, because the city's gonna have to pay to add, to do the design work.
Not the person that's trying to get the permit.
No, it's the city's document, so the city would have to pay to add items to the document.
So just a couple thoughts, legally speaking, as you're moving forward with this. First, Councilman Chavez asked, what are the pros and cons? Well, the con, let's say we're 3 years down the road, the con is of coming back to the city council as a body. We don't know what it is exactly the state's going to be requiring of multifamily housing over the next few years. And if we as a city need to move quickly through these things, this city council body could be different than it is today, and the council may struggle with design prototypes in a way that you wouldn't. flip side of that is, on the pro of bringing it back to you, you may not have Mr. Reimers, who's certainly earned your trust. You wouldn't want a community development director putting in basically a square stucco box as an approved design standard, because that's not what Temple City would want. You're not going to get the work that you have, that you'll be seeing as Mr. Coyne goes through this. So it puts you in a tough spot, I get it. And so think, as we continue to move forward, think about how you do want that library built, whether it's your planning commission, yourselves, or a future council, or whether having it at the staff level is okay. But this is a big decision, and I'm glad that you're walking through it, because it's certainly something we want to get right in the resolution this first time around.
Andrew?
Okay. Continuing on, I'll just quickly go through this. This is just the example of some of the floor plans for the R2 concept. And then this would be the sample front elevation. This is what you would see from the street. And this one is the Spanish Revival style. So it's characterized by barrel tile roofs, stucco, recessed windows, exposed rafter tails, all of the, I would say this is a design that's very popular in the city currently. We see a lot of projects that use this style right now. And that was why we chose to use this as one of the first prototypes that we were going to do. And this is just the side view, the rear view. The other side, this is along the driveway where the garages are.
Do we have similar types of buildings in the city like this already?
We do, yeah. In the R2 zone, you'll often see this development concept where you have detached two-story units placed along a driveway. And that's basically what this concept is. And then moving on, this is the mid-century modern version of the same prototype. So the massing is the same, the height is the same, the site plan is the same. The only difference is really the skin of the building and how we're making it have a mid-century modern appearance. So you would have a greater variety of building materials: wood, stucco, metal, glass, brick and stone, other things that just give it a modern appearance. And this would be the side view, the rear view, and then the view along the driveway. And then here's just a 3D concept, just showing the same thing from the front. Sometimes it's easier to see it when it's in 3D versus 2D. And then this is the mid-century modern version of that same prototype. So then moving on, the next...
These look like they kind of take up the same footprint, I guess.
They do, yeah. The footprint's the same, the building mass is the same. It's really just the skin of the building that looks different, yeah. Moving on now to the R3 concept. This is the second prototype that we created, and this is for an R3 narrow lot. This lot is, let me just quickly go here. This lot is 60 feet by 163 feet, 9,700 square feet in size. The allowed density is 8 units on this site, and the prototype is showing 7 units. So it's just shy of what the maximum allowed is. And in order to get to that level, we had to do subterranean parking. Most of the projects that we see in the city today never reach the maximum allowed density, and that's primarily because most of the projects in our city today are surface parking, and that takes up a lot of space. So if we want to get a project to the maximum density so they can have the maximum allowed units, they're going to have to do subterranean parking.
Excuse me, how about the previous concept that was presented? Was that built to the max, or is that still?
No, I don't think that one was built to the max, yeah.
Yeah. I still have trouble with the prototype, I'm sorry, because I also see that there are liabilities involved perhaps when something happened and then the builder said, well, I follow your prototype, so how do we address that? Maybe that's more of a great question. I follow your courtyard has a sight line of this, that, and somebody said, well, my kid got ran over because of the bush on you. I mean, I'm just making this up. I'm just saying that when we provide prototypes, how much liability, if ever, we take on? Or do we say, this is provided to you at your own risk? You know, we're not stamping the drawing, you're the design professional, that fire life safety, all those requirements still rest on you. I don't know if I read the staff report to that degree of detail, if that's included in there, that some kind of disclaimer that if you use at your own risk.
Yeah, I would say legally, certainly that, as Mr. Reimers has said, these are prototypes that are given over to show that if you use this design, you can have buildings of a certain size. You're still going to need an architect and a landscape architect to design out the specifics of any given site. So I'm comfortable that we're not taking on more liability with this than we would take on with, say, a discretionary review where we're doing individual approvals. But that's a very good question. Thank you, sir.
So moving on, this site, in order to have subterranean parking, is going to provide 16 parking spaces. And I should also mention that all of the units on this site, they're attached versus the R2 concept where they were detached. And they are all 2 to 3 stories high, which is allowed by the zoning code in the R3 zone. The subterranean parking is what you're seeing up here right now. It's a combination of parallel parking spaces and tandem parking spaces, which is also allowed by the code. Currently, we allow up to 30% of the spaces to be tandem, and that's what you're seeing here. And they also have an elevator leading up to the upper floor. Here's the front view of that project. This is what you'd see from the street. So one of the things that the zoning code requires is that where the building is facing the street, it can only be 2 stories. And then if you're going to have a 3rd floor, it needs to be set further back from the street. I believe it needs to be 40 feet back from the street. And this was something that was decided upon when we went through the zoning code update a few years ago. So what you're seeing here is kind of a concrete example of what that zoning code could create. So the upper 3rd floor is set back significantly from the front. And you can kind of see that here on the side view, where you have the 2-story up here near the street, and then the 3-story is set back. This is the rear view. This is the other side view along the courtyard. And then this is how it would look if it was put into a mid-century modern style. Same building mass, same footprint, just a different appearance.
Question.
Yes.
Do these concepts necessarily comply with each and every single code requirements that we have? For example, I look at some of these, they're kind of rather boxy. I thought I remember there was such language in our code that says every 24 feet you need a minimum of 4-foot offset. Do these comply? Is that requirement still there?
Yes, it is our understanding that they do.
But
and when we
look
had
at some of these elevated, like, I don't know, where's that 24 feet? Is there a 24 feet? On the 3rd floor, for example, it seems like a plank. I'm not saying these are not pretty. I mean, like I said, I wanted the architect, if he's listening to me, to know that, I found his design attractive. But I'm just wondering, do these meet every single code requirement on the books?
When we started out the process, we provided the consultant with the development standards of the zoning code, and we asked that the prototypes be consistent with those development standards. So what you're seeing today should be a concrete example of what those development standards could create. It's difficult to see every little facet because it's not.
But when I was looking at not so much this one, but maybe the next elevation, it seems to have a lot of long walls.
We do allow we require articulation along the side elevations, and so at least without having the measurements in front of me, these drawings have the articulation that we would expect to have.
All right. Thanks.
I'm sorry?
Exterior space?
Yeah, so there's, like, if you go back to the site plan, for example, here you've got the courtyard that's in the side yard, and that's all of the units open out onto the courtyard, and that's another requirement that the zoning code created in 2019. We want all of the units to open out onto the courtyard so there's a common space that all of the residents can utilize. So that would be the exterior space here. And then moving on, we already looked at the R3 examples. Sorry, the mid-century modern examples, pardon me. This is how it would look if it was viewed from the courtyard in the mid-century modern style. And then this is how it would look from the side in the Spanish Revival style. And then the third concept that we have is the R3, the wide lot concept. And this is a 100-foot wide lot, so it's significantly wider than the previous one. And you're going to get a lot more units with this one. The maximum density on this lot is 13 dwelling units, and that's what this prototype meets. It's providing 13 units on the first and second floors. And there's also going to be subterranean parking as well, because we would not be able to meet it otherwise. This is just the view of the second floor plan. And then this is the view of the subterranean parking. And then these are just examples of what individual unit floor plans would look like. And then here's a view of the project from the street. So the difference between the wide lot and the narrow lot, which we just showed you, is that the wide lot is going to have a courtyard in the center of the project. The narrow lot has the courtyard off to the side. So this one, the building is basically wrapped around the courtyard on all sides. And like I said, where it's facing the street, it's 2 stories. And then 40 feet back from the street, it's going to be 3 stories. And these are all just views from different angles of the project.
I just want to make a comment before I forget. You know, I love the courtyard concept, and it reminded me of some, I guess, I forgot the name of in Pasadena. They have that Garden City, I guess, ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I do find it, though, different is that if we have a 3-story around the courtyard, that seems kind of cramped. I don't know if there's any consideration of maybe that's too tight. I thought that, of course, we're not comparing ordinances, but I thought the garden concept doesn't have as much density.
The City of Gardens in Pasadena goes in their R3 zone, which is up to 36 units per acre, which is about the same, I think, as our zoning code now. When we proposed the R3 standards that are before you tonight, one of the compromises was that if we were going to require subterranean parking, that then we would need to provide additional space to allow for the added density by going up to the 3rd floor. So that's why you're seeing these proposals with a 3-story.
I see.
Yeah. I can do some research and find out what Pasadena's code allows in terms of the 3rd story or not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first of all, it's been a little while since I read it. I thought it was like only 2-story, but maybe I was wrong. But I like the concept. I just found that having 3-story and 2 on 3 sides, essentially, of the courtyard, kind of tight.
Do we have any subterranean parking now?
Yes, we do. We've had at least 2 projects in the past couple years that have gotten approval from the city with subterranean parking. I don't think they've been built yet, but they've gone through planning approval, and they've also gone through building plan check. And we also have one right now that's a 10-unit project on Temple City Boulevard that's already gone through pre-application, and right now it's under review by staff, and that applicant is proposing subterranean on that one as well. So it's not as common in Temple City, and that's something we're going to get to later in the presentation, but it's something that we have been seeing, and which we definitely are seeing in the larger region as a whole, like in our neighboring cities. So this, the view that I have up here just gives you more of a 3D view of that interior courtyard where the building is wrapped around it. And here's just an aerial view of that same project with the courtyard in the center. This would be page 50. And then if we were to change the style and make it mid-century modern, this is how it would look if it was mid-century modern. Same concept, just a different style.
I'm assuming the courtyards are the circular areas?
Yes,
there?
yes, that's correct.
Not much of a courtyard. I can see Vince's point. It creates kind of like
Yeah,
a
it's kinda tight, yeah.
little tight area looking straight down from the third unit, or third story.
And then, in addition to the prototypes, we also have these design palettes for both style that give applicants options for different types of architectural details that they can use. So in the Spanish Revival, it will be different details like decorative tile and ironwork and barrel tiles and recessed windows. In the modern style, it would be things like stone veneer and brick veneer, wood paneling, metal, again, just details that would help that building to fit into that particular style.
Hey, Andrew, if you go back to page 52, are those roofs, are those metal roofs, or are that just the way they look on the?
Yeah, it's a metal roof. It would be a standing seam roof.
Are there solar roofs, or?
New projects are required to have solar.
So those
yeah.
could those could be solar roofing then at some point.
It's my understanding, yes,
Yeah.
they can. So then moving on from the actual prototypes and the architectural details, we wanted to just briefly touch upon some of the other things that we did as part of this project. We asked the applicant to conduct a pro forma analysis to see whether these projects with subterranean parking would be feasible. And without getting into the weeds too much on that, the conclusion was that yes, they are feasible. And the applicant is here with us tonight, and I'm sure they will be able to answer some of those more detailed questions that you might have about it. But they did consider market conditions and estimated costs to construct such projects, as well as the density requirements that the city has. And they found that it would still be financially feasible for applicants to do it. And as I mentioned earlier, we've already seen some projects in the city that are doing that. So we do know that for some developers, this type of development pattern is doable for them. We do have some developers in our community right now that have never done this type of project, so this is definitely going to be less familiar to them. But that's why we're hoping that by having these prototypes, it'll make it easier for them to see the concepts and understand how they can make it actually work. And then, like I mentioned earlier, actually, we probably don't even need to touch upon this because we've already discussed it in great length.
Sorry, just one quick question.
Yes.
You talk about economics. I assume that the analysis was based on all market rate units. They are affordable is not part of the.
This was all based on market rate,
But
yes.
had affordable housing be brought in, I know the state is really big on affordable. What impact would it be, meaning that we're going to allow more units? What impact if developers came in and said, well, I want to do affordable, what impact would that bring to the, or that would not be prototype anymore?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't necessarily have an impact. Someone could take a regular unit and make it affordable without any changes to the project. Where the impact would occur would be if the property owner wanted to get a density bonus. So under state law, if they set aside a certain number of units, they can get up to a 35 or even a 50% density bonus. Under those circumstances, the most difficult thing will be how they would provide the sufficient parking to meet the unit count. The designs that are in the prototype don't respond to providing that number of parking spaces. So that would be probably the most difficult part.
Thank you.
So then moving on, we've already briefly touched upon this, so I'm not going to spend much time, but as I mentioned earlier, there's many lot sizes in the city, and this just represents an initial attempt to create some prototypes, but we want to have future ones added to the library. And we've created a checklist that we will provide the applicant that they can go through themselves to see if their project they're proposing is consistent with the prototype. And so the checklist will get really into the weeds in terms of, does your project meet the required setbacks? Does it meet the required building heights? Is the proportion of windows to walls the same as the prototype? So they're going to be able to go item by item before they even submit to us and know whether they stand a chance of going through this expedited review process. So in addition to the prototype library, we are also proposing some minor zoning code amendments, and these are related both to the SB 478, which I mentioned, and also to some just minor design tweaks that came to our attention as we were going through the creation of the prototypes. So as I mentioned, the applicants have a choice between the standard review process, the site plan review process, or this expedited review process. And we will allow for them to make changes to their projects to be consistent with the prototype. SB 478 is a new state law that took effect in January, and it basically says that we can't place limitations on floor area ratio on certain types of projects, and it applies to projects that are between 3 and 10 units in mixed use and multifamily zones. So specifically, that means that on projects between 3 and 7 units, we cannot impose a floor area ratio that is less than 1. And for projects that are between 8 and 10 units, we can't impose a floor area ratio that is less than 1.25. And then we also are not allowed to deny developments because they do not meet minimum lot sizes, and we are not allowed to use lot coverage requirements to prevent them from reaching the allowed FAR.
What's the current FAR for projects 3 to 7 units?
Well, in the R3, we don't have any R floor area ratio limitations. It's only in the R2. In the R2, it's 0.5. So 1 is definitely much higher than 0.5.
Basically double, you can build double.
Yeah. Then moving on, the minor design changes we were proposing was that it relates to stairs and balconies. Right now, we don't allow stairs on the exterior of the building. One change that we would like to propose is that we would allow stairs on the exterior of the building as long as they're integrated into the design of the building and they're built there to provide access directly to a unit. So some of the units have their entrances on the second floor, and we would like to let the stairs be located on the outside of the building as long as it's integrated into the design. It doesn't have an appearance of just being tacked on. And the same thing with balconies. We would propose that we would allow the balconies in the courtyard space. So these pictures up here kind of give you an example. And I wouldn't say balconies per se. I would probably clarify that to say landings, because if you're going to have an entrance on the second floor, you've got to have a space for people to walk and stand outside the entrance. So if you're going to have a balcony, we will allow it where it's facing a courtyard. We will not allow it, and this is consistent with the current code, we will not allow balconies in the rear, and we will not allow balconies on the other side of the building, and that's strictly for privacy concerns for neighbors.
So those are main entrances?
Main entrances, exactly. Yeah.
Can you get a refrigerator up there?
Probably. It would be difficult, but yes.
That's a real concern. I have one with the property I have.
Yeah. And with that, this project, my last slide is that this project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15305 and 15061B3 and 15378. And with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation and allow you to ask any additional questions that you might have.
When you say project is exempt, what do you mean project? Is a project using prototype, or is a project, or this is the project?
This project, these code amendments are not subject to CEQA.
But when a developer comes in to submit a project, they're not exempt from CEQA.
It depends, because if this project is going to be non-discretionary, then there's not going to be any environmental review for a project. That would be part of this, yes.
Really?
Yeah, CEQA does not, only applies when there's discretionary review.
Okay,
Mayor Sternquist?
yes.
I was just going to suggest, I don't want to stifle any discussion or of any kind from the council, but I was going to suggest, based on some of the feedback that I've heard this evening, that it may behoove the council to continue this as a public hearing to a date certain. At this point, just be with scheduling, because I've heard three key things. One, about the public noticing. Two, about the discretionary review and how that actually applies, and some additional analysis that wants to be done with that. Third, what the addition of the prototypes would be in the process that would be. So I don't want the council to feel rushed in this process in any way. So I'm throwing out there as a suggestion that this would be continued to the first meeting in February. That would also give us some time to have some one-on-one discussions with council members as well, seeing if there's anything. But that's just a suggestion as from me.
May I just add a little bit? I think that's a great suggestion from Mr. City Manager. I also want staff perhaps to think about what prototype really means. I mean, in my past life, I've done plenty of prototypes, but I actually designed the project to its nail, to the final stud and nail. So it's actually buildable, and the project was actually built. So we knew it worked. It complied with all life safety code. And then we give it to other designers, say, this is the prototype, go use it. You alter it, it's your risk. But what I gave you is something that's code compliant. But I'm not trying to, just a suggestion to see, how far do we take these quote unquote prototype? Do we give them a CAD computer file and say, go that, see if that fits on your site, and that way I wouldn't know how much you change the design based on your site. Just as a suggestion.
And I think that would be some of the feedback, I think, over the next couple months that we'd like to get from the council as well, and understand, so that when we do come, if the council so desires and follows through on that suggestion, that we would come back with something that vets some of those issues that you're concerned about, and that you've expressed on some of the policy concerns that you've expressed tonight, so that those are fully vetted until those are fully vetted for you.
Well, it's just a suggestion, Mayor.
I think it's a
wasn't my
good suggestion. What do you think, Fernando? Wade? Tom?
No, I have no problem.
So we don't need a motion then, we'll
I,
just,
I would only ask that you open the public hearing, and then after the public who is here tonight have had a chance to speak, just a motion to continue the matter open to the first meeting in February would be in order at that time. Thank you, ma'am.
thank you. All right, Steve, you have filled out a speaker card.
Mayor Sternquist, Mayor Pro Tempore Mann, council members, city staff. I'd like to see this sent to the Planning Commission to have their view of this and maybe make suggestions to you guys of how to do this. Because I think it would be better to start out to the Planning Commission and come back to council in February. This is very complicated, and there's a lot of little things that are going to need to be done to make it right. And I really think the Planning Commission would be the first way to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, can we get a motion to continue?
I make a motion to continue this matter to the first meeting in February.
Actually, Mayor Sternquist,
Yes.
since this matter is still
Oh, I'm sorry,
open,
go ahead.
if I could just ask
Oh,
one
that's right.
more question, because I don't think it's clear to me. Is the grant tied to the objective design standards? And what is an objective design standard? Because, like you mentioned, the public notice portion, is that tied to the objective design standard and therefore tied to the grant?
So when we applied for the grant, we included a description not only of the project, but of all the steps that we would take. And included within that was the idea of having these prototypes. So if we do not move forward with that project, we would need to check in back with the state and say that the project has morphed. Frankly, or to be clear, an objective design standard is getting away from design guidelines, which would typically say a project should complement a neighborhood, or the mass of a structure should be consistent with that of a neighborhood. Those would be objective design guidelines. What the state is trying to work cities towards are objective design standards, things that can be looked at a very black and white way. So some ways cities do that is by adopting articulation requirements that say the building has to be articulated at least 8 inches every 20 feet. That would be an objective design standard.
Okay, well, maybe let me rephrase. In our application to the grant, did we specifically say that part of our project will include doing away with the public notice?
No.
Okay, so that means technically council can hypothetically adopt everything, but then also tack on this public hearing, and we'd still be in compliance with the grant itself.
A public notice and a public hearing are different. A public hearing would demonstrate that it's no longer objective. Then it's subjective. But a public notice would just be a demonstration that either an application has been submitted or the city has taken an action on an item.
Okay, thank you. That was kind of what I was trying to drive at. Okay. But a notice may not have a public hearing, therefore there might not be a public comment period. It's just a posting, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and,
When you
all right, go ahead.
No,
Yes.
I was gonna tack on the question, because the line you're thinking, that the questioning. Do we currently have a process whereby we do send out notices, but it was really informing the neighbor rather than not a public hearing per se?
In the new zoning code, we do not have a process where we provide notice of something that people do not have the ability to give input on. So-
Really? Because I thought that the director's review of two-story additions, we do send out notices, but that you are the one making the discretionary.
That's
call on
correct.
that.
Yeah.
So there's no public hearing.
There's no public hearing, but the director is making a decision on that application in which there is discretion.
So in that case, the public can come to you and say, Mr. Reamer, I'm really concerned about this project because it looks right into my bathroom window.
Yes.
Right, and you would take that into consideration. You might, at your discretion, say to the applicant, well, I think you should move that window 3 feet over so it's not looking into somebody's bathroom.
Absolutely,
Right?
yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
That's all I have.
That's all?
Thanks, yeah.
All right, so, Tom, you,
Made a motion to continue to the first meeting in February?
Second?
okay, any objections? Roll call?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Vizcarra? Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Man?
Yes.
Mayor Sternquist?
Yes. Okay, so that'll be moved, continued to the first meeting in February. Thank you. Thanks for that suggestion, Brian. Okay.
Thank you for the staff, all their work. I know and the consultant team that maybe hopefully still on the line. Thank you to all their work through this time as well. We'll take a little more time. This is not time sensitive, but that's why we have some room, unlike some of the other issues that we've been dealing with, housing element and otherwise. But thank you to the team.
Okay. All right, we move to item 9, unfinished business, none. Item 10, new business, adoption of resolution number 22-15 5642, making an appointment to the Board of Trustees for the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. City Manager?
The mayor and council, this is the, every 2 years, the appointment, the current appointee is Mayor Sternquist. And leave it to the council to decide who that appointee is for the next term.
Okay. Any questions, council? Concerns?
Do you still want to do it?
Sure.
Isn't that the one that meets at 7:30 in the morning or something like that?
7.
Oh, 7. Yeah, more power to you.
Yeah.
What did you say? What did you say?
It's when the mosquitoes come out, probably.
Mosquitoes.
Or maybe when they go away.
Wow.
Happy to do it.
Well, Madam Mayor, thank you for doing it all this time.
Yeah, I just received actually my 10-year pin from them. 10 years of 7 a.m. in the morning. Leaving at 6:30. Okay, so we need a motion, please. Not everybody at
I'll
once.
move to appoint Mayor Sternquist to the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District.
I don't even see the motion.
Don't we?
I didn't see one, but I'll
There
just,
There is no
Is there a motion?
recommendation or anything.
If you could make a motion, though, to,
Yeah,
To do that,
that's
please.
fine. I'll second the motion.
Okay,
Wouldn't?
all right. Well, we going to open up public comment on this.
Oh.
or is it
oh,
public comment?
So,
Okay.
so
All right.
yeah, it's,
We'll wait,
Jumped
we'll
the gun.
delay the motion.
So, anybody have a comment? Okay, close public comment, and
I'll reiterate my motion to
Thank you.
appoint Mayor Sternquist to the Vector Control District.
Second.
it's my fault. All right, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Viscara? Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Man?
Yes.
Mayor Sternquist?
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, item 11, update from our city manager.
Wait a minute. We have B.
item
Got
10B,
B.
Madam Mayor.
Wait a minute,
Fine,
everybody
item.
said it at once.
Item
What-
B.
what's-
10B, item 10B.
Oh, 10B. Let me back up.
Why Susan's here.
Fiscal, appoint, wait a minute, how come my 10 is, now fiscal year 2022-2023, first quarter financial review. Treasurer's report, revenue, expenditure, and capital project summary reports and budget amendment. Susan?
Hi, good evening. Just setting up the PowerPoint real quick.
While Susan's setting up the PowerPoint,
Okay.
I'll fill a little time. Not that city managers don't fill airspace. I think she has it up. Go right ahead, Susan.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members.
Good
So
evening.
tonight is our usual quarterly review, and this is a review that goes from July 2022 to September of 2022. So the recommendation for tonight is to receive the fiscal year 2022-2023 first quarter financial review and related reports, and also approve and authorize staff to revise the 22-23 revenue estimates as was indicated in attachment A of the staff report. And a quick overview, I'll briefly go over analysis, the revenues, expenditures, and fund balance of general fund, a short conclusion, and the outlook at the end of the first quarter. So real quickly on the analysis, the general fund summary, the budgets are on target. I'll only be recommending 2 budget amendments, and that relates to revenues. And then on the non-general fund overviews, such as like Prop C, Prop A, their budgets are currently on target. So the budget amendments that I'm proposing are 2, as I mentioned. It's increasing the general fund revenues by $792,320. A piece of that is $18,000 adjustment on the in lieu franchise fees that we receive from Athens. As you know, we are currently receiving $300,000, and because of a CPI factor of 6%, we received an $18,000 increase. The second request for a budget amendment is to, excuse me, is for the CIP funding of a project that we had adopted in the budget of this year. And what I neglected to include on there is the revenue side or the sources of that particular CIP. So we have in lieu deposits totaling about $774,320 that's sitting in a, what we want to call an asset account, or actually liability account. And we need to recognize that as a revenue source. And that's why I'm requesting $774,000. And you'll see on the fund balance summary why that is required to be budgeted. On the expenditure side, there's no change. As mentioned, it's on target for now. So with the two budget amendments to the general fund, we're estimating an operating surplus of $745,000. And when we add the one-time expenditures, we're looking at a reduction of $253,290 surplus. With this, we're estimating a year-end general fund balance for fiscal year 22-23 at just a little over $22.7 million. And this is the pie chart. As you can see, taxes is the majority of our revenue source. And then when you include the intergovernmental, which is an in lieu of vehicle license fee, and technically it's property taxes, we're looking at another 32.6%. So taxes combined, if you look at it, it's over 75% of our revenue source for the general fund. And then with the budget amendments, we're looking at an adjusted revenue budget of just a little over $17 million. On the expenditure side, with the amendments during the year, we're looking at almost $16.8 million. And of course, it's more spread out almost equally. As you can see, public safety, as usual, is our highest or largest expenditure piece. So on the fund balance side, you can see that the current budget for operating surplus, we have an operating surplus of $727,000. We add the $18,000 of the additional in lieu franchise fees, we're looking at $745,000 surplus. However, when we factor in the one-time expenditures and the capital improvement budget at $491,000, $774,000, we're looking at a deficit of about $539,000. And this is how we determine that we need to budget the revenues from the in lieu deposits that we're holding in place. So as you can see, the first quarter revisions, I'm requesting $774,000, and the net effect at year end of this fiscal year would be a surplus of $253,290. Now, the estimated fund balance for 21-22 is at almost $22.5 million. And so with the $253,000 surplus, this is how we determine that our ending fund balance for the year would be a little over 22.7. And then I just wanted to go briefly over the outlook of some of the fund balance. So we can start with the fiscal year 2021. Our audited fund balance at the end of that fiscal year is just under $21.7 million. However, when we're still undergoing our audit this year for fiscal year 21-22, so the estimated unaudited fund balance is almost $22.5 million. And I just wanted to point out that part of this is a decrease of $267,000 where we need to write off the former redevelopment loans or advances that were on our books. So it was thought that we would be able to collect this balance, but as the successor agency of the former redevelopment agency winds down its business, which would be, I believe, the end of 24, so that was fiscal year 24-25, we are not going to collect on these owed balances. So with the new auditors in place, they saw this and said, why is this in your books? So the net effect is a reduction in our fund balance of $267,000. But still, it gets us to $22.5 million, which is almost a $700,000, $800,000 increase from the prior year. And we did consult with the auditors on this and how to record it, and this is how we came about with the $267,000 reduction. So in the end, at the end of this year, again, we're looking at a little over $22.7 million, which is an increase of about $253,000. Any questions at this point? Okay. So the conclusion is, again, the surplus of $253,000. Our sales tax revenues are trending higher. Our last quarterly report showed that our sales tax dollars are higher than our pre-pandemic collections. So that's a good sign for us. We're also seeing higher investment interest income. As you know, with inflation, interest rates for investments are increasing. So I will come back to council and request for a budget amendment once we see that. And then, of course, the two budget amendments, the $18,000 for the in lieu franchise fees and the CIP funding from the in lieu deposits. So what is the outlook at the end of this first quarter? Again, we were receiving higher sales tax revenues. A majority of the sales tax revenues are coming from restaurants. I believe it's about 36% of the revenues are from restaurants. As I mentioned, investment interest rates continue to rise, so we'll be receiving higher interest on those adjustable rate investments like our funds with LAIF or our funds with the county. So those interest rates adjust, and our interest income will adjust with that.
Do you know how much they're projected to increase? Is it a percent, couple percent?
I don't have the information. Currently, it's at 2.06% versus 21% last year, first quarter. So that's a big increase within a year. We do have interest that we do have investments that I recently put in that are earning almost 4% for a 2-year, 3-year term. So that's really good. So as, you know, the fiscal years go up, we'll be seeing additional interest income. But, you know, again, depending on the economy, interest goes up and down. But at this point, we're benefiting from the inflation.
So almost double
yes.
then.
Yes, more than double, yes.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder too, and Susan's role is our city treasurer. She's bound by what state law allows for in both the structure and in the allocation of the investments, and that comes from the early 90s bankruptcy with the county of Orange many years ago. So she's restricted. So maybe what you're seeing in the Wall Street Journal or elsewhere is not necessarily what we as a agency are allowed to invest in or have the ability to have a structured investment vehicle that would maybe get even higher interest rates than that.
So is there any flexibility? Does Susan have, I mean, is it a prefix menu you have to pick from here,
for lack of a better
here,
term,
here?
essentially it is.
Okay.
Right, I'm restricted to selecting types of investments and the long term, how long I can
And the
invest
length
in.
and the duration and
Yes.
and how that allocation is spread out as well. And so the treasurer's report that you do receive all that additional backup when she's purchasing a bond or a CD or something that the broker she's working with, it's not a broker dealer per se, it's actually a broker, and they're making sure that that is also complying, and they're making some adaptation as well that is also complying with state law. On top of that, what's reported first to the audit committee by our auditors is that allocation and what was essentially invested in during the duration of the fiscal year.
Do we pay for broker services?
No.
No.
No. Okay.
Okay, so next thing, even though we're receiving interest rates, our market value of our investments are getting lower. However, that doesn't really impact the city unless for some reason we need to withdraw before the maturity date, which we're making sure that will not happen. So we'll get 100% of our investment back. And then the second outlook, or last outlook, for the city, as you know, home sales are slowing down because the cost to borrow money has gone up. So buyers are slowing down on their purchases, so we're expecting a flat property tax revenue. And so tonight, as presented earlier, a recommended action is to receive the quarterly financial review and related reports, and also approve and authorize the 2 budget amendments, so staff may make that change in the budget.
Okay. So, we need a motion here.
Questions,
The
maybe?
open
Oh,
topic.
questions? They don't have any, I don't think. Vincent, did you have any questions?
No questions.
Mayor Sternquist, if I could ask one. Regarding the impact of the dissolution of the redevelopment agency, that's a one-time thing, right? So we're not
Yes.
going to see this in the future.
That's correct.
Okay. And just so I understand, because there's one sentence in the report that says the net effect of the reversals to the general fund balance is a reduction of 267,000. So that's a reduction of the general fund surplus, or a net
It would-
effect,
both.
reduction of the
Well,
general fund?
So we would hit an uncollectible account, which is an expense. So in essence, our surplus would be reduced by 267,000. So instead of having, let's say, $1.3 million surplus that would go into our fund balance, we're reducing that by 267,000. So 1,033,000 would go into as a surplus for fiscal year 21-22.
Okay. For some reason, I thought that amount was much larger, so that
No.
surprised me.
Yeah, so what happened, and I've been trying to understand how the entries were made. Most of the entries, which was the interest of over $2.2 million, it just basically zeroed out once in an asset account and a liability account. So it doesn't affect fund balance on that way. But
Okay.
for some reason, the principal did, because they recorded as if we were able to collect it. And we're not able to collect it, so we have to write off the net effect of 267,000.
Okay, well, for me, that's great news.
Yes.
So, all right, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Tom? A question? Okay, need to open public comment. Anyone? Close public comment. May we have a motion, please?
I would make a motion that we receive the fiscal year 2022-2023 first quarter financial review and related reports, and approve and authorize staff to revise revenue estimates as indicated in attachment A to the report.
Second.
Okay, any objections? May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Chavez?
Yes.
Councilmember Vizcarra?
Yes.
Councilmember Yu?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Man?
Yes.
Mayor Sternquist?
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Susan. Okay, item 11, update from our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Sternquist. I'll be brief. I would be remiss if I didn't note on the prior item of the fourth quarter, thank you to the council for your leadership from a fiscal standpoint, but also thank you to the executive staff and the team who really do a good job of really managing the resources that you allocate to us to deliver programs to the community in a really financially sound manner. So it's credit to them, and thank you for your leadership as well. And thank you to my colleague, our legal counsel, who also is part of that entire process as we go through the management of the city financially is a team effort across the board. So thank you, Susan, for being our city treasurer and our CFO in that process. Real quickly, Mr. Reimers and Mr. Murphy will talk to you more about this during the second meeting in December, but there are 2 bills that are coming into effect January 1st that actually deal with the process of applications and development applications. And so one of them is AB 2234, the other one is AB 2221. By and large, what they mean is what is submitted as a complete application, how much time you have, what are some of the issues related to ADUs in terms of front setbacks, what's allowed as front yard setbacks. We're going to talk to you a little bit more about that at the next meeting, but suffice to say, credit to Mr. Reimers and his team and our partner TransTech. We go through the process relatively quickly. There are a few modifications that we're going to need to make, but this is not earth-shattering for us in terms of this having to implement these two bills. There will be some modifications, but again, it's due to the good work of our staff and how quickly they work with our development community and getting applications in and processed that this, for some other agencies, this may be extremely challenging, whereas ours is just going to be more of a, not that it's not going to have an impact, but it will have more of a, it will have some modifications rather than some major systemic or and structural impacts. So thank you to them. So they'll be reporting on that next meeting. And thank you, our Parks Director, if he's listening. Congratulations on your new baby boy that was born the day after Lights on Temple City. Thank you. That's it for me, Mayor.
Thank you. Update from our city attorney.
Sure, sure. A couple things real quick. As the city manager said, we're going to save any legislative update on planning matters for next time. I wanted to make the council aware of Assembly Bill 1851, which was signed by the governor, and it causes on-hauling of paving, grading, and filling materials to be subject to prevailing wage law if an individual driver's work is integrated into the flow process of the construction. As best we can tell, this means that hauling to put stuff in piles that's then later hauled to the construction site will not be subject to prevailing wage, but when hauling takes something directly to where it's used, then it's part of the flow process, and so it will be subject to prevailing wage. This means the street projects, as they get bid out after the first of the year, will likely result in slightly higher costs because the on-hauling driver time will be subject to prevailing wage law, and so those rates will potentially go up a little bit. Second, completely unrelated, Assembly Bill 361, which is what we've been using for our potential remote access for council members to meetings, will be going away, or its effectiveness will go away at the end of February, as the governor has said that his declaration of emergency will go away at that time. We're going to discuss this in a bit more detail in January because there are there's a whole new process for meeting remotely, and so we want to go through that sort of step by step with you once we get a better understanding of all the details. It's a bit crazy. You all will remember that the current process requires you to post the agenda on the door and make your place wherever you are open to the public. There are processes by which you won't have to do that. You can be in a private place, but only under specific circumstances. So we'll be talking about that after the first of the year. And we're also going to bring back and talk about Senate Bill 1100, which allows the chair, the mayor, or other chair of a meeting to remove individuals who have been actually disruptive of meetings. Not a big deal here in Temple City on most nights, but when things get heated, as they have downtown at Los Angeles and in other cities, it can be very effective, and it's a good way to maintain order, but it may require an ordinance to be put in place. So we're looking at that, and we'll be talking about both of those in more detail after the first of the year. Thank you much.
Greg, just a quick question. I recently heard that the Board of Supervisors will now be allowing public comments, such as we do, after each agenda item. How did they get away with not doing that before?
You know, I don't honestly, I haven't been to enough of their meetings to know. For very large agencies, I know that they've often, obviously public hearings always had to have comments at the time of the public hearing. But large agencies very often grouped all public comment into the time for public comment. We do it, if you think about it, we do it for the consent calendar. We don't have a separate time for public comment on the consent calendar. So agencies with hundreds of items said, okay, now's the time for public comment. Again, hearings were separate, but regular agenda items, grouped it all together, let people speak, and then that way as they moved through, it wasn't as choppy. I don't know the details of what has changed in the Brown Act over the long periods of time that they've been doing that, but I do know that there are agencies that require all public comment cards to be submitted prior to an agenda item being called, and then they won't take comment cards after that. So if someone has an idea while other people are speaking, too bad. There's a lot of different approaches to the Brown Act. I like the approach we have here. I think it's the most open and the most public and provides for the best input. But thank you.
I was just surprised I didn't realize that they didn't do it the way we did, so I thought.
Madam Mayor, I believe that was one of the COVID accommodations, because they
so
went to
before
remote.
they were
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to
they
do
were
that?
doing that before. I mean, they were doing it at every item, and then during COVID,
Okay.
because of the remoteness
Makes
of the
sense.
hearing, that's when they went to grouping them together.
Okay. Greg, anything else?
I'll finish now.
All right, thank you. Council reports regarding ad hoc or standing committee meetings, do we have any? No? Okay.
Although, I guess I should mention, we're trying to schedule a school district standing committee, city standing committee meeting in
I think we got that.
January.
Yeah, I think we got that.
So if anybody has any ideas that you want to let William and I know, let us know, and we'll
Okay.
bring it up.
Were they working in conjunction with the city to, we had talked about it, I think the last time you met, to possibly work on doing some collaborative emergency
Probably one of the items that will be on the agenda.
this time? Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure somehow that gets covered. All right, great. Okay, council items separate from the city manager's regular agenda. Councilmember Viscara?
Well, congratulations to Adam and his wife on the new baby. It's been a long time since I've experienced that. It seems a different world ago. We had the parade last Friday, and in spite of the rain, as it came and went, it, I think, turned into a very successful endeavor and went well. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and all the staff. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Yu?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo what Councilmember Viscara. I wasn't, as comment, I wasn't able to attend the Light in Temple City, but I certainly missed it this year. But congratulations, and I heard I got a lot of good reviews, and well, great work. Just want to congratulate all of you.
Okay. Councilmember Chavez?
Yeah, same. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised, actually, at the turnout for the parade. It didn't seem, at the beginning, it didn't seem like there was anybody there. We were going to be going down a parade route by ourselves, but
Everybody was down at this end.
yeah, a lot of people showed up, and a lot of people stayed even after it started raining. But hey, it's wintertime, right? So, no, it was a good job, and please pass our congratulations on to Adam and his staff, and of course, congratulations to Adam and his new baby boy. So, we look forward to seeing him when he gets back. That's
Great.
it. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed Lights on Temple City. We got really lucky because it started raining right after we turned on the switch for lighting the tree, and after the snow stopped, or
Right, snow stopped,
the
the rain
artificial
started.
snow stopped. Because I remember my boys were there, and then as soon as the snow stopped, we started feeling like
So
water droplets. And I
So
thought,
snow turned into rain.
yeah, so it was kind of the timing
What's that
just
song?
happened sequentially. But it was great. I know this time we had the golf carts, which was different than before, but I thought it was well done. So a lot of kudos to Parks and Rec Director Matsumoto and all of his fantastic staff. And of course, we knew why he couldn't be there in person, so congratulations to him on the birth of his baby boy. There was one thing I was going to ask Mr. Murphy, and now I just forgot. But it was real. Oh, I remember. Regarding the prevailing wage law that you mentioned, maybe it's more of a comment, not so much a question. But I know that we are currently working with our city engineer, TransTech. We've been doing all this pavement work moving forward. But if I heard you correctly, the law is specifically for hauling materials to a work site. So I think for us, maybe we can work with the city engineer to look at. I know there's certain pavement reconstruction methods that recycle it in place, which I wouldn't know if that would fall under that law or not. So, there is kind of ways to do road work that doesn't require a lot of hauling. But it really depends on whether we have the conditions to do so. So it'd be kind of interesting to see how that plays out.
Certainly, and also to just let you know, as part of our work and our contract from a project management standpoint with TransTech, there's a labor compliance component that TransTech follows up with and has specialists that are on the project site and kind of ensure that labor compliance as well. So this is something I'll make sure that they know, but I'm sure that they're aware is coming up as well. So we'll come back to the standing committee as well for our next phase of our pavement management project to talk about maybe some of those potential impacts that you're noting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all.
That's it? Okay. We had some of us attended the Women's Club community party. It was very well done, and because Jerry's here, I want to congratulate him on being one of the recipients for the humanitarian award. It was Jerry, Mary, and Larry. Mary Sneed and Larry DePepe. So the joke was you kept having to say Larry, Jerry, and Mary, but congratulations, Jerry, and very well deserved. It was a really nice community event. Lights on Temple City, and ditto for that, and congrats to Adam on the birth of their baby. I want to share that our delegate to Foothill Transit, Fernando, attended Foothill Transit's inaugural fuel cell bus, hydrogen fuel cell bus that went into service. When was that, Fernando? Thursday? Friday? What day was that?
Yesterday.
It was yesterday?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I think it was the day before, but anyway.
That would have been Sunday.
Okay, so you're right. It was yesterday. Anyway, it was really wonderful to see, and it was so much fun because it was the first bus that went into service and to collect revenue. And so the first people that got on was a man and a woman. And when they got on, they were given Foothill Transit paraphernalia, lunch boxes,
And met with cheers.
and they were
from
met with
20
cheers with about 20 people, board members and staff that were on the bus. So they were very much overwhelmed, but I have to say it was really a quiet ride. And just a little bit of stats on that. Foothill Transit ordered 23 fuel cell buses. The first 3 yesterday was the first one, and 2 more went into service today. They produce 0 emissions, and they only emit water vapor, which is really amazing to think about. They, compared to an electric bus that we now have in service, they will travel up to 300 service miles, where an electric bus will only go 150 miles. To charge a fuel cell bus only takes between 7 to 10 minutes. And to charge an electric bus it takes between 5 and 7 hours. So we believe that hydrogen fuel cell buses are really going to be the future soon enough.
As they evolve, they really
How come they
will.
don't use more technology for cars then?
Actually,
It does exist.
yeah, it does exist,
Who's
and
selling a what is it?
hydrogen fuel cell.
Who's selling a hydrogen fuel cell
I'm-
car?
I don't know if they're for sale yet, but
Yeah, right.
Toyota
Susan, they
has
are.
it? About $150,000 probably? No.
But actually, the cars, fuel cell industry is supposedly in the next 5 years going to be challenging the electric vehicle market. So if you're looking at either one, you might want to wait a little bit and wait until more of the fuel cell buses are on the road, because there's so much less to, time.
And I heard
Constraints.
that the production of hydrogen is actually more carbon or make less greenhouse gases, because you can charge our electric cars, but still need to be produced the electric power.
Is the fare for those buses the same as a regular bus?
Yes, it is.
So they didn't raise the fee.
No, and actually Metro,
How
LA
much does
Metro,
one of those buses cost?
almost $1 million.
$3 million?
$1 million.
$985,000. They're a little bit less expensive than the electric buses were, by
Wow.
about $75,000. But you're looking at close to $1 million for either one, with a lifespan between 10 and 15 years projected before you need to replace it. Almost $18 million was grant money that was used, so.
Nice.
Yeah.
I haven't been
Very
on a
nice.
bus since I was in the Army, and getting on a bus now, I was expecting all that smell of the diesel
Yeah.
burning
It was
and all
brand
that.
new
Nothing.
smell.
It's totally,
Huh.
and it's quiet, and there's no smell, there's no smoke.
Ah.
No
So it's
smoke.
great.
The largest fuel cell charging station is at the Pomona Yard, because that's the largest one. And it does take up a substantial amount of real estate for the charging. Prior to that, there's one at Cal State LA that has a
So the
fuel
charging
cell.
stations for that are different from the EV charging stations?
Yes, yes.
So that means if they do this technology in cars, they're gonna have to either look for an EV charging station or a hydrogen cell charging station.
Right.
It's much easier when we could go to the gas station, isn't it?
Just
It's
stick it
not,
in the
I
pump.
guess that's a thing of the past.
One of the things that I happened to sit down and had breakfast with two engineers, and they told me the reason they were there is before every bus takes out, the two of them have to go through a complete, what do you call it, where they check all the systems, a system check, I guess. And, which takes up a little more time, and it's a little more expense, because you're paying these two guys to do this. But every bus will have that every time it goes out.
And they have
Huh.
to retrain some of the bus drivers, some of the more seasoned bus drivers on operating a fuel cell bus. So, I don't know, maybe it feels differently when you're driving the bus, I have no idea, but, it felt the same to me as
Yeah.
on an electric bus. But,
It was-
if
was
anybody
odd-
would
it was
like
odd,
to
it
go
was so
out and
quiet.
see a fuel cell bus,
I wish there was a bus that ran from Temple City to Pasadena, I'd take it to work, but I suppose there is, we'd probably have to transfer 3 or 4 times.
well, the problem is that we have Metro, who doesn't want to relinquish any.
You have a
Lines to
Tesla, it
Fidel
doesn't
Transit.
cost you.
I don't have a Tesla.
Well, it
Well,
kinda-
let's
it's
get
in
you
the
a
family.
Tesla. All right. I think that's about it. So let's see if there's any public comment. Anyone? Okay. No public comment, then we are adjourned.